you have the most powerful person in the world, in theory, being committed, or so it seems, to blowing up the entire world order that preserved a measure of peace and prosperity. So the impact of that you feel everywhere. And it's also been felt in the Middle East, of course.
Okay, so people think interviews are about finding common ground, right? Like you sit down with someone, you nod a lot, everyone agrees, very civilized. Well, that's not exactly what I'm interested in at all. I mean, I am interested in being civilized, but that's it. What I really want to know is how people think, especially, and this is key, especially when objectively you could argue they are wrong. Because that's where you actually see the architecture of belief, the mental shortcuts, the stuff they're not even aware they're assuming, the blind spots that feel to them like clarity. And look, this is my background talking, behavior analyst's brain. You don't study human behavior to prove yourself right. You study it to understand why someone arrives at a conclusion that feels obvious to them and completely upside down to you. Which brings me to this conversation. Dan Perry, I had him on before, decades at the absolute center of Western media power. Former Associated Press editor-in-chief, and we're talking Europe, Africa, Middle East, Cairo Bureau, London. He's been in conflict zones, in diplomatic backrooms, the whole thing. The kind of career where you're not just reporting on history, you're in the room while it's being made. In this conversation, yes, we disagree on a lot. Gaza, Hamas, Israel, how you even begin to distribute responsibility, historically, morally, the root cause, all of it. And that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation. Because, and here's the thing, this isn't about making each other look bad or reducing everything to talking points. It's about something way more interesting. How do two people looking at the same facts build completely different models of reality? And they can actually talk about that without turning it into some crazy performance art. We're living in a really interesting moment in history right now. On one level, the world order is visibly coming apart. Trump, don't get me started. The rules based international system, whatever that even means anymore, is virtually crumbling under its own weight. Europe's having a severe identity crisis, to put it mildly. Gaza is in ruins. The Middle East burns. Leaders of countries are kidnapped. One NATO member threatens another over Greenland, for crying out loud. Institutions that spent decades claiming moral authority are just, I don't know, improvising, making it up as they go. But then, and this is the strange part, public discourse is getting simpler, louder, more tribal. Everyone's supposed to pick a side. Nuance gets treated like betrayal. Even asking questions, that's weakness. Curiosity is even suspicious. So, no, I'm not doing that. You're going to hear disagreements in this conversation, sharp ones, real tensions at points, but then moments where we almost find common ground and then we just diverge again. That's not a flaw, that's the whole point. Because if you actually want to understand power, violence, ideology, conflict, any of it, you can't just listen to people who already agree with you. You have to sit with voices that force you to examine whether your thinking might be incomplete or lazy, or where theirs might be. So this isn't designed to make you comfortable. It's designed to make you think. And if at some point you feel uncomfortable, good. That's usually where the interesting part starts. Let's go. Dan Perry, nice having you back. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Thomas. Good to be back.
Likewise. I just checked the last our last conversation was somewhere in 2024. That's quite a while back. And I believe if anyone would have told you or us what has all happened in the meantime, we both wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like only yesterday, but I guess time flies when you're not having fun. Um, yeah, a lot has happened for sure. And yet a lot has stayed the same. Hamas is still in Gaza, and Netanyahu is still the prime minister of Israel. I think the main thing that has changed is that Trump has become the president of the U.S. I think our conversation, I think it was in mid 2024, not after the election. I mean, I think in that regard, a lot of people just didn't want to believe it was possible, even though they saw that the Democrats were messing up that election and it seemed theoretically possible. And now that you have Trump as the president, it's a it's a global drama, and some would say state of emergency. It's not just another president. It's not just another conservative, if you even want to call him conservative, which I kind of wouldn't. Um, you have the most powerful person in the world, in theory, being committed, or so it seems, to blowing up the entire world order that preserved a measure of peace and prosperity. So the impact of that you feel everywhere. And it's also been felt in the Middle East, of course.
We just had last week the World Economic Forum in Davos. I analyzed a couple of speeches there. It's just incredible. It's virtually dancing while the world burns. And if you allow me an analogy, 4 weeks ago, we had this nightclub fire in a Swiss ski resort. 40 people died. And what struck me is that you had these young guys still dancing and filming while the fire was already spreading on the ceiling, completely not realizing, that the party suddenly became a death trap. And if you put this on Davos, I had the same feeling, right? Everything is kind of, you know, rules-based order. Yeah, I mean the speech of Canary, the Prime Minister of Canada, was outstanding. But for the rest, I still had the feeling that they're still dancing while the world is on fire.
I uh I mean I think that is something that is inherent in human nature. Just like I say, a lot of people didn't want to believe that Trump could actually be elected to a second term. I think you see the flames, you don't want to believe the place is on fire, and you somehow your brain tells you it might be pyrotechnics. As for Davos, look, I have a slightly different view. Um, I understand you're talking about Mark Carney's speech, and of course, Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, cuts. I mean, if you're a normative person in the world, he cuts a sympathetic figure compared to Trump. I mean, he's obviously civilized. He's not self-obsessed. He doesn't go around like, dumping on Justin Trudeau and other predecessors and making up achievements in Ottawa that no one cares about in Davos. He is articulate and he can put together coherent sentences. Uh, and he seems to be well intended and not corrupt. So, I mean, compare that to Trump. Good Lord, you gotta love Carney. And of course, Carney did something that a speaker always wants to do, which is to speak hard truths that are somehow surprising. So you're original and you're surprising, and everyone's paying attention all of a sudden. But here's the problem. The headline from Carney's speech is that we are now living in a rupture, not a transition. The whole world order that was partly based on a little bit of a lie has been blown to pieces, and we got to figure out something totally new. And my view is this. Imagine an alternative scenario where, Trump runs on a platform of ripping up the world economy and destroying trade with tariffs and, letting NATO fall apart and threatening NATO allies with invasion and obsessing about various nonsense and ripping up the American government, destroying all the regulatory bodies and canceling like an ogre from some cartoon, canceling the Department of Education. Okay? Imagine if he'd been open about all this ridiculous stuff that he intends to do. And he furthermore was running against a really strong candidate. I mean, the country's sexist and racist a little bit, so this is a man who's white and tall with a lot of hair and who won primaries and was like fabulously popular on the other side. And he ran a great campaign. And yet Trump wins by like 10% of the vote. And then he goes ahead and does all these things. And the polls show that 70% of Americans support it, hate NATO, want to invade Greenland/Denmark. All right. Then Mark Carney gets up at Davos and says exactly what he said. And it makes sense. And he's right. But that world I just described is a fantasy scenario. The actual world is one where Trump denied everything. He ran on a grievance that he won a 2020 election and about hating the wokes. fine when he was asked about Project 2025, which is a Heritage Foundation blueprint for everything he's done. He denied it existed, said fake news didn't exist, you're a very bad person. He won by 1% of the vote, 1.45. He didn't make 50%. The candidate running against him is Kamala Harris. Unbelievably weak candidate. Never win a primary, not in 2024, not in 2020. Very much tainted by hiding Biden's incapacity. Completely uncharismatic. Barely won. Goes ahead and does all these things, and every poll in America shows that the people hate it. They hate the tariffs. They hate the Greenland. They hate the ice. They hate most of it. They like the crackdown on immigration, but not this way. They hate the big, beautiful bill budget that makes the rich richer and increases the debt, the national debt, and increases the deficit, things that he specifically promised not to do. It's all a terrible misunderstanding and an accident. The American people have in no way chosen this. And Mark Carney gets up at Davos and says what he said. So on my Substack, I wrote about this in a column in Newsweek yesterday, and I repurposed it on Substack, and I have a caricature on Substack. You see Mark Carney, behind him is a house. Yes, there are flames coming out of the top window and out of the side of the building or something. So there's a fire in the house, but it's standing, and clearly the fire can be put out. And Carney's saying, the house is gone, nothing to be done. We're gonna live in a tent now forever. And it's completely unnecessary. He's conceding to Trump a destruction of the world order that is premature. And he's doing it to be interesting or something. And I'm very much unimpressed by that. Moreover, his his uh his recommendation was for middle powers like Canada to band together against the big bad monsters. And the big bad monsters, I think, he means the US obviously, and China. I mean US obviously because Trump is tweeting maps of North America, including Canada and Greenland, where the whole thing is under an American flag. So, I mean, what? And by the way, I don't know if I suspect most of your viewership is in Europe. Maybe people don't know the shit literally that Trump tweets. There's a tweet of an AI video of him flying over New York, and he's wearing a golden crown. He's the pilot of like an F-35 or something, and he's wearing a golden crown, F-16, I think. And then when he goes over New York and there's all these protesters who are presumably against him, he dumps shit on them from the airplane. And then people in Times Square are covered with like mountains of human excrement. And this is the president of the US. So we got a problem. But yeah, the US is a big ogre, as is China, but it kind of sounded like when he spoke of middle powers, Carney, he didn't just mean Canada and Australia and maybe South Korea. I have to think he meant also Germany and, and France and other
Global
European
South.
countries. Well, if he's reducing Europe to a collection of middle powers, he's undermining the viability of the European Union as a singular unit that is maybe the equivalent and in some ways the superior, at least economically, of China and even the US.
If it would be united, which is not.
But it's trying, and in some ways might
Mm.
be. And you could argue that as an economic bloc, it is. Because look how the European Union at the highest level, at the united level, just struck an amazing, I mean, somewhat amazing, and certainly interestingly timed trade deal, free trade deal, almost free trade, with India. Massive. And that was European. In undermining Europe and pretending they're a bunch of middle powers, he's ironically helping Trump and Putin, because that is their common goal. So I understand that people loved Carney being basically a person who doesn't sound like an idiot, and he certainly didn't sound like an idiot. But I think much of what he said was strategically idiotic. Forgive me for being blunt.
But it just was a week before Davos in China, where he signed some major trade deals, right?
China.
So,
Well, I
so
mean, he's a
they
middle power trying to do middle power
exactly.
things. He also absorbed for that a threat from Trump to impose 100% tariffs on
Mm.
on Canada. Now, this is amazing. It really is amazing. I really think Trump doesn't know how tariffs work. I'm starting to think. I'm
And
starting to
m-
think that it's real that he doesn't.
yeah, but
And
do most Americans know how tariffs work? Because they think, apparently, they think, the Chinese pay the tariffs. I
well,
mean,
that's what Trump has been saying.
yeah,
We've brought in billions. We've brought in hundreds of billions of
from
dollars. And the
what?
Chinese are
From his
paying.
own people. From his own people.
First
China
of all, the
doesn't
numbers
pay.
are false. Secondly,
Yeah,
yeah, it's American
yeah,
importers and
yeah.
exporters. So let's suppose that Trump, in his imbecility, really does impose 100% tariffs on Canada. Uh, okay. That's going to cause home prices in America to skyrocket because they depend on lumber brought in from Canada. So all the wood that is brought in from Canada is going to be doubled in price, at least. Okay? Yes, Canada will be bummed because they want to sell the wood. That much is clear. But Canada will not pay anything. They'll look for new markets in China and in Europe and in the global south. That's what will happen. And it'll be disruptive to the Canadians, but it'll bring inflation and misery to Americans. Now, there really is a fork in the road. Does Trump know it or not? He's lying. If he knows that he's lying about it, then the question is how dumb the people are. Answer, a lot of them quite. Uh, but if he doesn't know it and he's not lying and he's the one who's dumb, then we got a global emergency. And neither one is particularly good a scenario. And it comes down, I think, to the Supreme Court. They were supposed to rule 2 weeks ago, last Friday. So 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks ago. And
How many of
they
those judges, sorry, how many of those judges are now appointed by Trump from,
well, not a majority. I think three are appointed by Trump.
yeah.
But they have a supermajority, 6-9 for conservatives on the court, because
Mm.
others were appointed by Bush. Um, and Bush Senior, like um, Clarence Thomas. Well, the tariffs are illegal. And again, I assume you know why, but I doubt our listeners do. Most of them, I think. So, real quick, under American law, it's Congress, the Senate, House of Representatives, that can impose tariffs in general. The president can propose, but the Congress must dispose. So uh, there is a loophole from the 1960s that says you can impose tariffs by executive order in specific cases of a pinpoint economic emergency. So if the U.S. car industry is about to collapse right now, tomorrow, unless we stop imports of cars from China, then then the president can do it by executive order on a specific industry from a specific place for a specific time to handle the emergency. And then reality catches up and we go back to something normal. So Trump's solution is he just declared trade with everyone from everywhere at all time with all things an emergency. All trade is an emergency. And based on that, he you know presents charts of like every country what their tariffs are going to be just on his whim. Not legal. Uh, But Trump discovered something really, really amazing that others didn't discover before him. Uh, you can do illegal stuff, and then if if your party's majority in the parliament is a bunch of lemmings and sardines and quislings, then they're not going to stop you. And then you're left with the courts, and the courts take time. So, for example, you could say, right, we're gonna hand out the death penalty to everyone named Thomas. Very dangerous people. Very dangerous people. And you start killing Thomases. Thomas Karat is over in Europe. He might get away with this, but my friend Thomas Pochet, no, no, no. He's rounded up by ICE and put to death. This is illegal. But the courts take time. Maybe a local federal court in my friend Thomas's home state tries to stop it, but the federal government immediately appeals to the district court of appeals, and it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will sit on it for like 2 weeks, maybe 2 months. In the meantime, you've killed every Thomas. And by the time the Supreme Court rules against you, which presumably they would, even though they're conservative appointees, it's okay. You've killed enough Thomases. You move on to killing Dans. Yeah?
Hmm.
Uh, and people forget because you start threatening war against Denmark. He's discovered this. It's crazy. Now, no one in the history of the world or of the U.S. would have behaved this way. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Nixon. I remember as a kid watching Nixon on TV resigning and saying, I'm not a crook. I'm not a crook, said Nixon. He cared. He cared that we should think he's not a crook. Trump is like, I'm a crook. People who aren't crooks are very bad people.
Don road doctrine, right? Not
I
from
love the
Donald,
Don
but from
Road
the
doctrine.
Don, from the mafia Don. Yeah.
Yes, well, from Donald, from the Mafia Don, and of course an oblique reference to the Monroe Doctrine, where America controls what happens in the Americas. Hence, you can
Yeah.
abduct the dictator of Venezuela, you can threaten to annex Canada, you can threaten to invade Greenland. Yeah.
So if Russia exercises their kind of Monroe doctrine in their sphere of influence, we are almost preparing now Europe for hot war with Russia because this is what I see Europe's direction is going to. At the same time, we have an American president who says, no, 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 the Western Hemisphere, that's all ours. And we pick this president out and we kidnap him and we change the government there. I mean, not to forget that America has changed what 75, 80, they had 75 to 80 coup attempts and actual coups since the Second World War. So that's not something new for America. But as you said so explicitly, right, in the national security strategy being outlined. Yeah? By the way, 49 times, and you can check it, 49 times the word Europe and the word want, coincidentally, the exact same number in the security strategy. So apparently it was more about Europe than about America, right?
The word, what was the second word?
Want. I want. We
Oh,
want. America
want.
wants.
Yes, yes,
As a
yes.
linguist, that stuck
Extremely
out to me.
jingoist.
Yeah,
Look, I thought that was a shocking document. I mean,
it
not
was.
shocking in the sense of surprising, shocking in the sense of horrific. Uh, Basically, he broke with uh, almost 80 years of bipartisan consensus in America. Every leadership from the left or the right agreed that democracy is a good thing and promoting it is something America should do. One way to use American power is to maybe tell countries that are not democratic, look, if at all possible, be a little bit democratic. Threw that out the window.
He doesn't want to be a democratic leader. He wants to be an authoritarian leader, right?
But, well, he doesn't want America to be much of a democracy, but he's also saying we shouldn't be in the business of promoting democracy because many countries aren't ready for it. As for Europe, this is a bit of a contradiction. The thing was full of contradictions. He's basically saying they've given up on Western civilization. Presumably, that includes liberal democracy. That's a fundamental invention of Western civilization. So it kind of looks like he maybe does care, but it isn't really what he cares about. When he's saying Europe has given up on its civilization, he's not talking about the niceties of democracy. And he's not even really talking about the thing that he pretends he's talking about, which is free speech. He thinks Europe is about censoring the AfD in Germany and, censoring opposition to wokeness and censoring or canceling pro-Putin candidates in Romania. It's about the Elon Musky free speech thing.
Mhm.
But what he's really talking about is that Europe has forgotten what it means to be white. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. I go to so many cities, you can barely recognize the cities. He doesn't mean that that Paris is full of modern architecture and La Défense. That's not what he's talking about. He says I don't recognize it. He's talking about a racial issue. And it's a little bit comical because, sure, a lot of people are unhappy with the degree to which immigrants are dominant in Brussels downtown. I get that. Yeah, it's true that people are unhappy. And in some cases, Europe has a very big problem with illiberal immigrants not being assimilated and being illiberal. And that's a problem for liberal people to deal with being liberal with illiberal people. As you're going to undermine that's a big paradox that Europe really is wrestling with. But good Lord, the biggest proportion of immigrants anywhere is just over 10% in France. And in Europe writ large, Muslim immigrants, maybe 5%, 6%. I mean, I think I'm exaggerating. So they're not taking over Europe, although some cities in particular look different. But compare that to America. In America,
LA, I just saw pictures of LA. It's unbelievable.
America really is going to lose its white majority by
Mm.
like 2050, I think. America has huge non-white minorities, much more than Europe. So if you're a racist and that's your issue, I mean, America is in worse shape from your racist perspective than is Europe. Furthermore, if you're for real about caring about Western civilization and liberalness, America's right now in the grip of an authoritarian would-be wannabe elected
Exactly.
dictator. That hasn't happened yet
Exactly.
in Europe anywhere.
Mm.
So if I look at the
Well,
two blocks, where is Western civilization in less danger? It's in Europe, not America.
mm,
But the worst thing about the national security strategy that you mentioned is that it makes very clear transparently, and you might say, well, I applaud the transparency. It makes very clear that values count for nothing anymore. Everything is interests. Now, you can be a cynic and say everything always was interests. I don't think so. I think it was a mix. And with Trump, there's no mix. It's
mm.
just interests, and I would add short-term interests. And I would further add short-term interests polluted with Trump's personal corruption.
This is a whole different topic. I mean, we're starting with his crypto coin from himself and Melania to all kinds of contracts, going now to Gaza, 1 billion. Again, Palantir and Oracle building the digital infrastructure for an absolute total surveillance society. That's what they envision. And whilst they're doing so, earning billions over billions over billions, all for Trump's billionaire buddies,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I assume any huge infrastructure project that will be led by the Trump crowd will be corrupt. As for it would be crony capitalism and indeed nepotism. I mean, what's the son-in-law doing?
His son-in-law, exactly.
I mean, what the
Exactly.
hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you couldn't if you're trying to do really. I mentioned a cartoon before, a Marvel
Mm,
cartoon, about like an evil dictator elected president with the
mm,
corruption as a cherry on top of the rancid cake. This is what you got. On the other hand, surveillance state in Gaza, we got a real problem in Gaza. I mean, it's been run by jihadist terrorists for the past 20 years. You're trying to expunge Gaza of their support. You can no longer be pretending about the niceness of liberalness. You have your right to your point of view. They're trying to like burn out the Hamas DNA. And so I think with Gaza, most people observing it, including Palestinians, are outcome oriented. Like, how do we fix this disaster? And
mm. But what is the outcome? I mean, the best case scenario for Palestinians in Gaza is when they become dishwasher in Trump's hotels.
mm,
That's the best case scenario.
well, I mean, it may be the best case realistic scenario, but the best case scenario available to Homo sapiens would be a complete elimination of all Hamas traces, a government dedicated purely to prosperity in Gaza, zero hostility to Israel, met by a liberal, moderate Israeli government, so political change in Israel, with masses of money coming in from the outside to build from the ground up a Gaza Singapore, with a port at peace with itself and the world, with its children educated to the maximal degree with foreign money, and the entire world, from North America to Europe to the East to the Arab countries that are wealthy, with the support of everyone else, because there's been regime change in Iran, everyone focused on making Gaza an example of what can happen when out of night comes day. And all the energy that humanity is focused on, is capable of, is focused like a laser beam on Gaza to make it an example of a phoenix arising from the ashes. That's the
mm,
best case scenario.
mm.
And
But
and 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 any person who says, wait, my great grandfather fled from or was expelled from some village that no longer exists around Jerusalem, and I want to go back to Israel, and to make that happen, I want to start blowing up little kids in an Israeli shopping center. Anyone who thinks that thought is immediately stopped and put in a re-education camp by the surveillance state built by Jared Kushner.
that's a very tricky one because then the main proposition for whole of Israel, if someone's great grandfather claimed, to have been in the 2000 years ago in Israel. Yeah? But I think you said something
I
very
agree.
important.
That's a big
You,
paradox. I think people look the the aftermath of World War II created millions and maybe tens of millions of refugees, and you know this very well. Germans from Poland and other East European countries and Russia even were expelled. Um, Masses of Jews moving around, all kinds of nonsense in almost every country. I don't have to tell you what happened in the Soviet Union. I think 15 million Indians moved between India and what became Bangladesh and rather
Pakistan, India, Pakistan. Yeah.
Pakistan, Pakistan and East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Millions and millions and millions. All right. In Africa, we don't even know what happened because no one paid attention to Africa. Uh, in Palestine, 600,000 Arabs left what became Israel. Half probably were expelled, been in a war, half left of their own volition. All right. And about a million Jews went from Arab countries into Israel, and many of them were expelled also, and no one speaks of their lost property. Now,
Well, they
I,
were they
I
were bombed by Israel to scare them, like
somewhere, somewhere, but believe
in
you me,
Iraq and it. Yeah.
somewhere, that's true. And in some cases, Israel even prompted the local governments to encourage Jews to leave. That's also true. But many were kicked out, period, end of story. Many. No one speaks of the Jews kicked out of Arab countries, of course. Forget about that. No one cares. Uh, Everyone has been asked to get over themselves. There is no patience anywhere for any Pakistani who says, oh, I got to go back to New Delhi. No one wants to hear about that. No one speaks about that. No one speaks about the Sudeten Germans. Forget about them. It just happened. Get the hell over it. Everyone's been asked to get over it. Everyone, with one exception. Palestinians who have been given United Nations organizations, sub-organizations, whose goal is to perpetuate the refugee status. So you have right now in Lebanon a couple 100,000 Palestinians who are born in Lebanon, whose
Jordan also.
great grandparents, when they moved 2 kilometers north to Lebanon, didn't know they were Palestinians. Because if you find me one mention of the Palestinian people, not referring to Jews, but to Arabs, before 1961, you deserve a Nobel Prize for investigative journalism. It doesn't exist. They thought they were Arabs from Galilee. But now they're progeny, 3, 4 generations later, Palestinian refugees. Okay? Give me a break. The Arabs have perpetuated this in order to perpetuate hostility to Israel and delegitimize Israel. Now you say, ironically, the entire Zionist project is based on a refugee claim from 2,000 years ago. Well, that's true. It's true. The world has many cases of paradox and hypocrisy. The Jews, given all their gifts to humanity, uh, and they are many, given what the world owes them with the Holocaust, given what the Europeans did to them with centuries of anti-Semitism and pogroms, the Jews say, forget about the Pakistanis, but give us a pass. We got to have this little tiny territory, and we'll make the most of it. And you know what, Thomas? They made the most of it. They practically invented the computer chip in a cell phone. Give them the little tiny thing and let them have their somewhat comical refugee claim from 2,000 years ago.
Hmm.
My view.
I'm sympathetic. I mean, I've discussed this before. Yeah. So coming out of the Second World War, and I was in London. I actually interviewed a number of Jewish Holocaust survivors, actual Holocaust survivors, a child Holocaust survivors, and some people on their periphery. So I'm absolutely sympathetic to someone who comes and has survived the Holocaust to want to have their own country. I completely get it. Yeah. But what we are seeing today, uh, I don't want to go into semantics, yeah, but I have the feeling that in a future time we might see the same memorials and museums that we today have for the Holocaust, for what's happening right now in Gaza. So I agree with you. So
Problematic, Thomas. Problematic. Problematic. Israel was very, very, very brutal in trying to achieve goals that were extremely,
repeatedly, I mean, not only
extremely
now. I mean, we
just.
look, yeah,
Extremely just. Now you could say,
just
well,
just from Israel's perspective.
from any perspective, it was the biggest. Getting rid of Hamas, getting back the hostages, first of all, sure,
Okay, you're
just.
focusing on
Getting
after,
rid of Hamas
yeah.
is number one a favor to the Palestinians. I mean, talk to people in Gaza, maybe. Uh, but putting that aside, they stopped worrying about the fact that, and as they're going after Hamas, there's like all these civilians in the way. They just stopped worrying about it, and it was unbelievably ugly, and I don't support it. But
They even shot their own people. They even shot their own people.
But by mistake. The point is, of
Mm,
course, that was by mistake. They were reckless. There's a very big difference.
Hannibal doctrine. I mean, even after the
Look,
actual day.
Thomas, they denied the Hannibal Doctrine. They deny it,
Oh, of course they do.
and
Of course they do.
they never. There's not one case where they admitted to implementing it, which basically means kill everyone, including your own people, if you must, to achieve a goal. Um, when they killed their four hostages, it was clearly a mistake. They didn't know, but it showed that they had a light trigger finger because of the trauma. I don't want to be put in a position of justifying this. I'm just saying if you're very brutal in trying to like expunge this terrorist nightmare that has just attacked you and massacred over 1,000 people, and you've just decided that's it, we got to get rid of these people, and you're very brutal about it, and you kill masses of civilians, that's pretty bad. But it's a little bit different from Hitler deciding on the final solution and creating a machine to exterminate Jews because they're Jews. And while you're at it, gays and gypsies. I mean, a machine to exterminate them is a little bit different from a brutal war in a just cause. And the comparison is ridiculous. And by the way, almost everyone who faced a very terrible enemy eventually became brutally reckless in an embarrassing fashion. And I point out what we, the Western allies, did in Dresden and in Tokyo with the firebombing, of course, as well as more recently what the Western alliance in Iraq did in Mosul and Raqqa, where the goal cannot have been more just. Get rid of these monsters in Islamic State. But they ended up killing at least 10,000 civilians and probably more in Mosul. So to be blind to all that and to compare what Israel did to the fucking Nazis and to to ignore intent, I think is wrong,
I
and it
think
shows
that
how successfully anti-Israel propaganda has become part of thinking in the West. By the way,
mm,
where are all of the imbecile students at Columbia University, my alma mater, by the way, when it comes to supporting the people of Iran being massacred by their own criminal government? Funny. I haven't seen a single protest. Could it be? Could it be that this is the result of TikTok propaganda against Israel, but not against Iran?
well, TikTok propaganda as of now is basically officially over, right? So Larry Ellison and co took it over. The algorithm has already been changed. Now there is a new, ironically, there's a Palestinian-made social media platform called Upscrolled, which is now number one downloaded platform globally. So
Really?
yeah, you can check it out. It's called Upscroll. You can see it on the Apple
Well,
Store.
there
It's
you go.
globally number one to download. Yeah,
Maybe the
censorship
Palestinians are
free.
going to be startup nation now. I can only hope.
Not in Palestine, obviously. Yeah, somewhere else, right? But
If
coming,
obviously not in Palestine, that's not Israel's fault. No one prevents this from being built in Ramallah or Hebron or Jenin or Qalqilia or Nablus. If they wanted to use their autonomy for good and to build a startup nation, and made clear that full independence would in no way threaten their very close by neighbors who have reason to feel threatened, namely the Israelis, they might have a better go of it than what's actually happened, you know? Well, I hope they do create a startup nation. I have nothing but goodwill and, and, and karma towards the Palestinians, but their history has not been so promising, basically.
It's
And to
give and
just blame
take.
it on Israel wanting to kill them is, forgive me, is would be infantile.
It's give and take. But I would like briefly to come back to something what you said before, because you said it very quickly, but I think it's very important. You qualified that all, the happy flow scenario for Gaza has to come with a different government in Israel. So we can't have such a right-wing government in Israel. So again, it's give and take. Yeah. Now, at the moment, it doesn't look like anything will change anytime soon in that respect.
Really? Why do
Yeah,
you
you
think
tell
that?
me.
Well, look,
Uh,
Israel has to hold elections by October. Um, every poll I've seen for the past 2.5 years, even since before October 7th, shows Netanyahu losing that election by a very big margin. And specifically, in Israel, everything is about the two blocks, the Arab center left bloc and the Likud right religious bloc. And every time Likud, the right, and religious parties get 61 out of 120 seats, the right won the election. At that point, the actual coalition can go different ways. They can maybe do a coalition with the center left as a junior partner if they want. But the Likud leader is the prime minister because his bloc won the election. Last poll I saw last week shows the Netanyahu bloc at 49 seats and the opposition bloc at 71. And it's not one poll. It's every single poll, except for the ones run on Channel 14, which is a propaganda outlet of the right. But it really is. I mean, they're not pretending. Um,
but there's, of
and
course,
this is
sorry.
because in 2023, within days of being of assuming power, the Netanyahu coalition began a project to Putinize Israel, to create an elected autocracy, and it was not popular. And there were millions of people protesting in the streets. And the security heads were begging Netanyahu to stop because they said it projected weakness and invited attack. And they were begging him to meet as late as September 9th, 2023. And he refused to meet with them because he knew what the message would be and that it would leak. And that attack came on October 7th. And on October 7th, the Gaza perimeter was left unprotected. 200 soldiers and 100 women lookouts, I think, is what you had around Gaza because the entire army was in the West Bank where the radical settlers were trying to do pogroms against the Palestinians to stir things up to create a new intifada. Now, this is the scum in Netanyahu's government, and this is what Netanyahu enabled and did. And so Hamas was able to break through the border and massacre 1,200 people. And Netanyahu gets blamed, rightly so. So what does he do? He starts a war that he then refuses to end because of the argument that, well, we can't do an accounting and an investigation what happened October 7th while there's a war. So he builds a paradigm that incentivizes the forever war, which trashes Israel's reputation. So I have to sit here listening to you comparing Israel to the Nazis. Okay, none of this is very popular. So he's going to be crushed in the next election unless he runs a great campaign or cheats.
Unless, Trump tries now to install this board of peace in Gaza. And if you read this proposal, you will find that he himself is the chairman for life. He determines the board, and he also invited Netanyahu to join the board, which he initially refused, but then apparently accepted,
He
right?
apparently
So
accepted because his arm was twisted by Trump.
that can be, no, where I want to go with this is it could theoretically, I mean, there are also people think that Trump might, strive for a third term. But let's say next election, Trump is out for whatever reasons. He is
The
still the
Constitution reason.
chairman. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. He's still the chairman of the Board of Peace in Gaza for life. And with Netanyahu sitting on there, what implication would that be for him as, I don't know, for his corruption charges, for example, which are also kind of, I don't know, they're not really stalled because I actually saw their interrogation tapes. Yeah, but
No, the
uh,
trial continues, but as a joke, because Netanyahu uses every conceivable trick in the book to delay and obfuscate and
as you
introduce
said, it takes
nonsense.
time in
He's
America. The courts take time in America and in Israel. Yeah, exactly.
no, it's but in Israel it's become a joke. It's 5 years and it just goes on and on. Netanyahu has become like an expert in prolonging it while complaining that it's going on so long. I mean, his hypocrisy and uh, bad faith and mendacity, lying, have reached a level where it's unacceptable anymore. So I, for example, am not interested in debating Netanyahu. He just needs to go. I can't. To debate him is to be brought down to his level. You come out needing a shower. Netanyahu must go, and I think he will go in this next election. As for the border peace, you're taking it a little too seriously, I think. Um, if you really talk about the procedures and what it means to have X or Y be on the board, this is obviously corrupt boondoggle for Trump, and it's meant to again make a play for the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's meant to make him look like a big boss in the world, and he's not even pretending it isn't a mafia. He would control who joins. He gets $1 billion from everyone who wants a permanent seat. Whoever else gets in, he decides. Whatever decisions the board makes, he can veto or approve. Whatever financial decisions are made, he can veto or approve or initiate. And he's there for life.
It's a
So
private kingdom. It's a
this
real,
is
true
like
private kingdom.
Trump, the Trump castle. Uh, it's ridiculous. No, no serious constitutional democracy is going to join. And if they do, it'll be
Hungary.
arms twisted to pretend. It'll be to pretend in order to
Mm,
avoid tariffs if the Supreme Court doesn't squash the tariffs. It's
mm.
just a joke to wait out Trump. The minute Trump is no longer empowered to do anything, the whole thing will implode. It won't exist in 2028. And no, Trump is not running in 2028. It's all just bullshit. What's more likely is that Trump will be removed by his own party before 2028 to create an incumbency for JD Vance. Um, but even even something as ridiculous as the Board of Peace might be helpful in Gaza. Because if there's one thing more ridiculous than the Board of Peace, it's having Hamas be in charge of a government. This has to end. And if somehow the Board of Peace can bring in enough players from the region and from the non-democratic world to create pressure on Hamas, maybe that's good. I have a great idea for the first action of the Board of Peace. Hold a huge event in the non-Hamas controlled part of Gaza in the perimeter and have Putin be there and have all the big Arabs be there, from Assisi to MBS to the Emir of Qatar to, you know what, Erdogan. Give Bibi something to shout about. Be like, no, 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 we cannot allow Erdogan. Erdogan is a crypto supporter of terrorism. And he'll say that, and we'll ignore Bibi, and that'll be the big victory against Bibi. And all these people will be there, and they will say, we have $200 billion ready to go to rebuild this place. Hamas must go. Not pretend to go, go. We're going to give their scumbag terrorist leaders a free pass to go wherever the hell they want, hopefully to hell, but we don't really care. They get out of here. And we have this technocratic government ready to go. We have the Board of Peace with Trump, who everyone admires, ready to supervise the whole thing. We have made Israel get out of the way. We kind of think Bibi's going to lose the next election anyway. And everything is ready, Palestinians, for the Dan Perry Singapore scenario. But one thing has to happen: Hamas has to disarm for real and now. You choose. Because if you choose badly, you're going to continue living in tents and on ruins. So have at it. And then I want to see polls by Khalil Shikaki, who sits in Ramallah, I believe, showing that 95% of the Palestinians would like this to happen. And then see if Hamas resists. I want to see
Hmm.
this. And if the Board of Peace does this and brings about the first ever voluntary disarming by a jihadist group, then you know what? I'll hold my nose and pretend like this is not a ridiculous, corrupt joke.
At the end of this conversation, because I know you are pressed for time, a little thought experiment. Let's say Hamas is gone, completely disarmed, gone, expatriated, whatever. In Would it not require that the oppression stops if you want to get the thoughts, the ideas of Hamas out of the minds of Palestinian people? Because without stopping the oppression, because without stopping, I can't even say the status quo, but without stopping what's happening since 75 years, there will be another Hamas, there will be another group, there will be another generation. So without exterminating the root cause, do you really believe just rooting out Hamas will do the trick?
I don't think that's the root cause. I just don't. I also don't think you're accurately describing what you call oppression for 75 years, actually 78, because it sounds like you're talking about the existence of Israel. Israel has 20% Arab citizens who aren't Hamasish. So are they being oppressed? A little bit, like the blacks in America. Uh, but on the other hand, you don't have a more classic potential fifth column in the planet in all history than Israeli Arabs, who are the same ethnicity as all the surrounding countries that were all at war with Israel. And yet, they're loyal, mostly. They're not oppressed, not really. I mean, budgets a little bit, yes, all kinds of stuff, but they're citizens and they vote. They have
They
judges.
can't walk, they can't walk on certain streets, they can't
No,
pass
no, no, that's not
certain
true. Not true.
the- man,
Thomas,
come on.
well, it really seems like you don't know. You think Israeli Arabs can't walk on certain streets?
Yes,
Which
there's lots of
streets?
evidence. I don't have the street names, but there's lots of evidence from on the street where Arab citizens of Israel were not allowed to pass even certain streets. Yeah.
Thomas, it isn't true. All right? I mean, sure, there might have been a day when the street was blocked and they thought it was a terrorist alert, and terrorist alert was, for Palestinian Arabs, and maybe Arabs for Israeli citizens were stopped. Who knows? There is no law that they can walk on certain streets. They have all the rights of
There
Israeli
may be
citizens.
no law. Yes, there may
And
be
there's
no
no
law,
practice
but
even. Forget about it. It's not true. Now you have three other kinds of Arabs in East Jerusalem, which was annexed
mm,
by Israel, and they have the right to become citizens, but most of them have chosen not to, and Israel does make trouble when they actually choose to try to become citizens. Then you have the people in the West Bank, most of whom are living in the Palestinian autonomy zones. Then you have, of course, the misery in Gaza. Each one is slightly different, and there certainly are cases of oppression, absolutely. Obviously, the Gazans have been oppressed, but because of Hamas, that sparked this war that they could not win. In the West Bank, you have
it's the chicken or the
no,
egg.
no, no,
It's the
no, no
chicken or the
chicken.
egg
I
story.
no, no, no. There's a dragon, and I know what the dragon is, and it's Hamas. In the West
Mm,
Bank, you have a complex situation because the current Israeli government wants to continue settlement, put settlements in near the Palestinians. It
mm,
enables the radical settlers to, in various ways, attack Palestinians. None of it is like when the Palestinians attack Israelis and blow them up. These guys like destroy their olive trees and throw a rock at a shepherd, but it's bad and it absolutely is aimed at oppressing the Palestinians in the West Bank. It's not official Israeli government policy, but this government is a bad government that enables it because it depends on the radicals. And sure, there's a problem with writ large how Israel treats the Palestinians apart from the Israeli citizens about whom you are misinformed.
mm.
But with the Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza, there's an issue. Um, does that
But coming back to
justify does that
if you allow
justify
me,
Hamas? I don't think so. And by the way,
but if we
Hamas's raison d'etre is not to end the oppression; it's to end Israel. That's their goal.
if we come back to the question, yeah. So let's say Hamas is gone, disarmed, expatriated, whatsoever, but the situation doesn't change. Don't you think this is just a matter of time before you have another resistance group? No matter if it's in an absolute surveillance state, no matter it's inside or outside safe zones,
I don't
if the
know.
oppression does not
Sure,
change,
maybe.
and I'm not even saying the current form. Yeah, you could change the type of suppression, yeah, or surveillance or whatever, yeah.
I don't
But
know.
as long as those people are
If
not
the
free, really
Palestinians,
free, like you and me, don't you think there comes another
I don't
Hamas
know.
sooner or later?
Let's suppose that you sanctify the 1949 armistice lines, and you say the Palestinians must have a state that must have an army on that border, exactly that border, and anything less than that is oppression. So I would think that's bullshit. Because that border,
That's also not what I'm saying. Yeah.
hold on, but that's what some Palestinians say. That border would come within 20 miles of Tel Aviv, would surround Jerusalem on three sides, would have an army, and you know that many of the Palestinians would still want to destroy Israel. So Israel cannot have that. They won't allow it. Not going to happen. Not unless Israel's defeated totally. So if you think that's oppression, and that must create a new Hamas, maybe. But if your definition of
No,
not oppression is like
it's much
is
more down
real,
to earth with it's much more down to
sure.
earth with the common people.
So
What do people
Thomas, let,
want?
let me answer. Let me
Live in
answer.
peace,
Let me
have
answer.
food, have water, have
Yeah,
electricity, the
sure.
basic stuff. This is what I'm talking about.
So if you think Israel wants to deny them food, water, and basic stuff, again, you're misinformed. The issue is security. You are misinformed. Uh, I absolutely agree they should have all that. And I personally want them to have independence and and a contiguous territory free of the Israeli army, but it must be demilitarized. And within those contexts, yeah, I think they could not give rise to a new Hamas. I think they could agree to live under certain uh, limitations, like not having an air force in this tiny territory, the way that Luxembourg doesn't have an air force, and that's not so terrible. Yeah. And of course, they should have food and water. This is so basic. The fact that you even asked that shows, really, I mean, the idea that Israel oppresses them like the Nazis must have really struck root in Western Europe for nonsense this radioactive to actually be spoken. Yes. No,
Then
whatever
there is
happens, whatever,
at
let me
this
answer.
very moment.
Whatever happens, even if another resistance group comes about because they don't like the borders offered to them, even then, it doesn't have to be a nihilistic jihadist group in the thrall of Iran that's delighted to have its own people die because that serves some jihad cause. The particular virus that is Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Shiite militias doesn't need to arise again from oppression. Oppression doesn't need to give rise to that monstrosity. It is a mutation of Islam. It is a product of Iran, of the Islamic Republic. It is evil. It is self-defeating, and it, I hope, can be stamped out. And if subsequent oppression gives rise to a new resistance movement, let it be a regular resistance movement that is not infected with a jihadist mutation.
The Dutch here, where I live, were occupied by the Germans. They had a resistance movement, right? So I think it's a nature, coming back to what you said at the beginning already, it's in the nature of humanity, you know?
Yeah, sure, but we have to define what oppression means. True oppression, like you're being denied food and water, yeah, it should lead by human nature to a resistance movement. Let us hope that people who suffer such oppression and give rise to a resistance movement do it like the Resistance in France and not like Hamas, which would then be happy to see the French be killed and would engineer the killing of the French because, I don't know, because of the glory of jihad, French jihad. You see what I'm saying? You're flirting with defending the indefensible. There is no defense for Hamas. There's the defense for the PLO, maybe, in its old terroristical variant. A resistance movement wanting to kill people who oppress them. But Hamas has no justification. Jihadism should be wiped out from the face of the earth. And I say that as a liberal, because I cannot handle the illiberalism of jihadism that literally is trying to kill its own people. It's
We
my
have we
mind
have
in the
Al-Julani now, the former head of ISIS, shaking hands with Trump in the White House.
well, first of all, Trump is not my gauge of decency.
No, I get it.
Secondly, look, it's a Christian idea that you can be redeemed. Where once you were evil, now you walk in the valley of light. I guess it remains to be seen.
Hmm, that remains to be seen.
Yes.
Hey, then concluding, I would really like to say something, yeah. We both know we don't see eye to eye on certain topics. Nevertheless, I really enjoy the conversation with you, and I appreciate that you come on, right? So there are certain things that we definitely agree on when we look at Netanyahu. I would caution, and the same is true for Trump, Netanyahu, and Putin, removing those leaders. I mean, I always say, be careful what you wish for, because the alternative might even be worse, right? So if you come back to Israel very briefly, if Netanyahu loses the election, in a nutshell, encapsulating, what would be the change really, if there would be any?
Night and day. Night and day. To
Also
begin,
for Gaza, for the West Bank. You really think that?
yeah, of course. Netanyahu is absolutely corrupt and obsessed with staying in power and will stop at nothing to stay in power. He's not a normal politician. There's a notion that all politicians lie. There's a notion that everyone's corrupt. Such notions, such cynical notions, basically serve the truly corrupt and the professional liars. I've lied, you've lied, We're not Donald Trump who lies like he breathes oxygen. I mean, I don't I don't prefer to lie. Uh, Netanyahu and Trump are that way. They're very different. Whatever comes next will be a normal person leading a cabinet of normal people whose fundamental
What makes you so
inclination
confident? What
whose
makes you so
fundamental
confident?
inclination is good if at all possible. And that is not
But
the
what
current
makes you
government.
so confident that this is really happening? Because if you look at the history of America, for example, geopolitically, it never changed anything. They went the course they had already since the Second World War.
I
So
couldn't disagree more. Trump has been a departure from everything that preceded.
this, yes, agree, except Trump. I agree. Yeah. But
Well,
prior to
no,
that,
but
yeah,
there's also been differences. There's been differences.
minor differences. Yeah.
There would
But
not have
again,
been
coming back
there
to,
will not have been a civil rights movement in America if not for the Democratic Party. No, I'm sorry. I know
yeah,
Israel.
I said specifically geopolitical terms.
Geopolitically, there's been a bipartisan consensus, more or less, since World War
Exactly.
II, and
But
that's
again, specifically on Israel. So if there comes somebody replacing Netanyahu, I mean Netanyahu is not the only one who executes this. What's happening right now? He needs the military. He needs political support. It's not only Netanyahu. So if you
Netanyahu is a
say
very good politician
agree,
who flirts very much with one man rule. There are certain politicians that managed it. Like if you look at Keir Starmer in Britain, I don't think he can do crazy shit and stay in power more than a few days. And that applies to most prime ministers and chancellors and presidents of normal constitutional democracies. But then you have exceptions, and Trump is an exception. He figured out a way to do the craziest nonsense, and of course, is not just that he has figured out a way. The U.S. Constitution very definitely gives the executive potentially great powers. Look, if Bibi's gone, a number of things happen. The corruption ends. The huge argument with Europe ends. The basic situation where Israel is flirting with being a rogue country that doesn't care what anyone but Trump thinks ends. The dependence on the Haredim ends. The dependence on the ultra Orthodox. So that internal issue in Israel, which is internal but affects geopolitics also, they're the third of the settlers, ends. The dependence on the far right ends. And that dependence on the far right prolonged the Gaza war because the far right wanted a forever war. Um, and the government will be dominated by people looking for an accommodation with the Palestinians. And I know them, and I know it. And if you tell me there's no difference, I don't know. You're kind of ignoring that Rabin did the Oslo Accords that established autonomy, and that Barak and Olmert offered the Palestinian statehood on 97% of the land they seek, and both times these idiots rejected it. Uh, Things happen differently if you have non-evil people in power. So I don't know. Sometimes people on the left can be a little bit too cynical. I myself am on the center left, but I'm not that cynical. I mean, there's different people, different mindsets, different value sets yield different outcomes. In the case of Israel, if the far right and the Haredim no longer have a stranglehold on government, and if the prime minister is no longer a venal character like Netanyahu, far better things can happen.
okay. Then last question. I know you were the chief for Associated Press, but these days, today, what are you doing? I mean, when people want to reach out to you or want to read what you write, where can they best find you?
Uh, I mean, they can email me at danperry2018 at gmail.com. I do various PR work, by the way, which is not heavily subsidized. So I'm a consultant. I have a company that consults NGOs and so forth. Uh, I am a Substacker. So I went from being, for 28 years, the most company man person conceivable, working for the same company, the Associated Press, and rising. I became, in the end, the editor in chief for Europe and Africa, based in London, and then the editor in chief for the Middle East, based in Cairo. So I went from being company man to being creator economy Substacker. I would love for everyone to sign up to ask questions later, which is Dan Perry, which is danperry.substack.com. But I'm also a columnist for The Forward in the US. I'm an opinion contributor for Newsweek and for The Hill, and I appear all the time on Al Jazeera, I-24, News Nation, Indian television, whoever will have me.
Al Jazeera, actually, that's true. I saw some really interesting interviews that you gave on Al Jazeera. True.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that can be fun. Also, by the way, I'm involved in various projects mentoring young journalists. So one particular project I'm very much involved with is run by the London School of Economics Ideas think tank and the Ratsu Forum for Democracy in Romania. And we do many things, but we all mentor young journalists from Romania and from the region. So I have a young mentee from Hungary this year, and another one doing work about Moldova and Transnistria, which has a Russian aspect to it. And the idea, of making sure that there's a new generation of journalists that believe in the role of the press as a public good and not just a business, but also know how to make it a business without vulgarizing it. That's a complex balance but a necessary optimum that is tough to strike. It's not science, it's not chemistry, it's alchemy. But when done right, you know it. I mean, you know what good journalism is. And I think it's important for the proper conduct of free countries and even free markets, I would say.
On that note, Dan Perry, thank you very much for joining. It was my pleasure talking to you. It's always very interesting.
Thank you, Thomas.
If this conversation stirred something in you, maybe a question that won't quiet down, maybe an uneasy feeling you can't quite name, great, that's the point. So don't scroll past it, follow it, see where the echoes lead. And you can find them in my archives on YouTube and on Substack. There you find the threads connecting what the headlines keep apart: politics, propaganda, psychology, and power. Go there if you're done consuming and ready to start seeing. Because understanding the present always begins with recognizing how the past keeps rewriting the script.